Okay, so first thing we're going to do is go over the basics of how to animate in Maya. We kind of did this on our first day of class, or the first day we got into Maya anyway of class. So some of this may seem at least vaguely familiar. But basically, any attributes you see over here that have a dark gray background in this channel box are keyable attributes. And what that means is they can be set to be a certain value at a certain point in time. Now, the point in time that you choose is based off of what is selected down here in your timeline. Okay? Now, so right now I'm on frame 64. I can change what time is represented here on this timeline a few different ways. The global time that your entire scene should deal with is based off of this box right here. This is the start time of animation. And then the end, the very last frame of animation, is the end time of animation. That's this box over here. Okay? And then you can choose a subsection of that animation if you want to by entering values into this box. And this is the playback range. Okay? So if you're working on just a certain portion of the animation, then you can use this range here. And it's described, this is the end time for the playback range and the start time for the playback range. You can also edit that by clicking in this little box at the end of the range slider and dragging it. And it's only going to play back in this case, between frame 47 and 100 right now. Okay, I can shrink this down even more if I wanted to, and now it's only going to play back between 47 and 65. Now, a really important thing to do when you're doing animation, and you guys will not want to miss out on this tip, okay, because most beginners get this wrong, and almost all beginners will get this wrong at some point, if not all of them. If you click on this little icon at the bottom right, like I just did, then it'll pull up your preferences window for the time slider. And you want to set this playback speed. You want to change it from play every frame to real time. So real time 24 FPS, so frames per second. And so what that means, and I'll click save, if I had play every frame selected and it was something that was really easy for my computer to figure out, then it's going to play every frame of this timeline as fast as it possibly can. Now, we want to see it based off of real time. Okay? So, that's why we set that to 24 frames per second. But now that I'm thinking about it, we're working on a special effect shot, right? And so our video is typically recorded at 30 frames per second. So let me come back into this settings. I'm going to change this to other, and I'll tell it to play 30 frames per second. Okay, and click save. Now it's going to play 30 frames per second if it can. So that leads me to another key piece of information. You'll want to go to display, heads up display, and make sure this frame rate is selected. Okay, I'll deselect mine. It was this number down here in the corner, and I'll reselect it just so you guys can know for sure what I'm talking about. Okay, so right now my computer is playing back this scene at 0.5 frames per second. That's because I'm not changing anything. It doesn't really need to re-render it. But if I press the play button, and I can play it forward or backward, you can see this goes up to, and it tries to keep it right around 30 frames per second. And you can see it jump around a little bit. Don't be alarmed. It's doing the best it can to keep it consistent. It mainly jumps when it reaches the end of the playback time and has to go back to the beginning. Okay. Now I can play it in reverse. Now I don't have any animation yet, so don't judge. Not yet. Now I have these other options here, and I'll explain these other playback options. But basically, I can step back or forward a single frame. So that steps forward one frame of animation, or one frame of the scene, or back. And this will rewind all the way to the beginning of the playback time, or fast forward all the way to the end of the playback time. Okay, these other two arrows that have the little red line in them, which you'll see in the recording or in your own version of Maya, they allow you to jump to a certain key frame or a key. And I will explain that in further detail here in a minute. Okay, so now there are multiple ways to set keys on an object in Maya. And when you're doing this, most likely you'll be keying what's called the transform. And the transform is the node that houses the translate, the rotate, and the scale values. So if you want to key everything that's in this box, in the channel box, you can press S on your keyboard, making sure that your panel is active. I middle mouse clicked inside my perspective view to activate that panel. And then I can press S, and all these attributes turn red. At least their values turn red. That means that they are keyed. Okay. You will also notice down in my timeline, there's a red line in my timeline now at frame 65, because that's the frame I had selected when I pressed S. And now this cube knows that it's supposed to be at this location at frame 65. And these are its values. Okay, so if I go to frame 53 and slide that up and then scrub my time, it's going to pop back down because I did not key it. I did not tell it to be different at frame 53, even though I did move it. So I have to tell it that the move that I made, I want to keep it. And so I have to set another key. So I move that up. I can press S. And now I've got a red line on frame 53 in my timeline. Now it's going to animate between those two keys. Okay. Now I'm going to undo a couple things previous to my keys being done. It's actually usually more beneficial to key only the attributes that you want to key, that need to be keyed. This can be accomplished a couple different ways. If I'm only animating the translate Y, then all I really need to do, and I'm going to shift my time back to frame 0, and I'm going to use frames 0 through 24. So on frame 0, if all I'm using is the translate Y to animate, then I can key the translate Y by selecting it in the channel box or just right-clicking on it and telling it to key selected. And now only that attribute turns red. Okay. And then I can move this up. Well, actually, I need to change which frame I'm on first. And I can move it up. And then I can key select it again. So I just right-clicked on it and told it to key selected. And now it actually is keyed. And I have a red line in here on those frames, frame 0 and frame 12. Now you'll notice, and I want you to realize that if there is a key on the selected object for the frame that you're in, or for a specific frame, it doesn't even have to be the one you're in, then a red line is going to appear. That